Thank you, Bob. We're continuing our sort of mini Easter series by taking a look at another person that found himself around the cross, around the time of the crucifixion of Jesus, and played a very important role in what happened. Judas Iscariot. Kurt Solly is with us this morning, and in a few weeks he's going to be portraying Judas Iscariot in our Easter musical, Hallelujah for the Cross. So Lorna and I told him this morning, this is all about you today. No, really, it's all about Jesus. And even in the midst of what happened, through the actions of Judas Iscariot, we see that God has a plan. Judas is one of the most perplexing characters that we have in Scripture. The story's short part of the story is found in the Gospels, but primarily I'm going to look today at Matthew chapter 26, verses 14 and 15 and 16. And there are a couple of things that perplex us about Judas Iscariot. Number one is, why did he do it? Number two, after he did it, why did he feel so guilty? Over the centuries, there have been many different reactions to his story. Many people have labeled him as sort of like Adolf Hitler, a hatred for Judas Iscariot. Others have pitied him because by the time he came to his senses, it was too late to undo what he had done. Still others have questioned God, and how did God work in all of this, and how could one man bear so much guilt for the death of Jesus? So Judas Iscariot is a mystery. All the other disciples we can kind of understand. We can even understand Peter. But Judas remains a mystery. What made him tick? Was he crooked from the very beginning? What did Jesus mean when he said Judas was doomed for destruction, that the scripture might be fulfilled? There's just all kinds of questions. And sadly, we don't have time to answer all of these questions today, but I want us to get a glimpse into the story. We read in Matthew chapter 26, beginning in verse 14. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. As we think about this account, as we think about this story, let's sort of fast forward to the end of the story as a place of our beginning today. It's early Friday morning in Jerusalem. The Jews are finished with Jesus. They have had their kangaroo court. They have called their false witnesses. They have charged him with the trumped up charges. They reached a verdict that Jesus is a blasphemer and one who deserves to die. So the religious leaders are going to take Jesus now to Pilate. He's the Roman governor, and he's the only one that can order Jesus to be put to death. And so this is the scene. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of clatter, there's a lot of moving around as the group begins to gather together to move forward to go to the praetorium where Pilate is staying. And as all of this activity is taking place, there in the background, there in the shadows, stands one man, really a forgotten man. It's been a long night for him. 6 or 7 hours have passed since he was at that meal in the upper room. And after he left that room, he went straight to the chief priest to make the final arrangements. Then he made that short walk across the Kidron Valley to the Mount of Olives. There were a few words, there was a kiss, there were some angry comments by Peter and the others. Jesus was arrested, he was taken away. The aftermath. There stands Judas holding a bag with 30 silver coins. He's in the shadows, standing there holding his bag, all the other activities taking place. He was a key component that triggered what was happening that night. And now he stands in the background as a forgotten man, yesterday's news. The truth of the matter is, no one had really any use for a traitor. Through the long night he had waited, hanging around the edges of the crowd, listening for some word of how things were going. We might ask, well, what exactly did he expect? I mean, he's the guy who triggered all this stuff. Well, we don't know for sure, but several hours earlier he wanted Jesus to die, and by sunrise he had changed his mind. Memories kept gripping his mind, I think, as he stood there. As he saw the commotion, he saw Jesus being led away, he began to think about, these are some things that in my 3.5 years or so that I followed Jesus, these are some things I heard him say. Those things begin to be played back again in his mind, sort of a rewind. And maybe he would even think of some of those little jokes the apostles used to tell each other. Maybe he would remember stories that he had heard Jesus tell time and time again as he gathered the people together and taught them and helped them understand some things about the kingdom. Maybe he remembered even the smile on the face of Jairus' daughter when Jesus raised her from the dead. Or maybe he remembered the look on Peter's face when he walked on the water and the water held him up. Or that picture came into his mind of those 12 baskets of food that was left over after Jesus had fed the 5,000. He could see and he could hear it all, and memories of these things were beginning to flood his mind, and they were almost too much to bear. Then as the crowd began to move by and he sees what's taking place, he hears what the rumor is going from person to person, being spread across the courtyard. Yeah, they've condemned Jesus to death. They're gonna kill him. He's gonna die. They're gonna take him to Pilate, and Pilate's gonna put the death sentence on him. Then there's that commotion in the courtyard. Judas sees Jesus being led away to Pilate. And I think it was in that moment it came to him in a blinding flash that he had made a mistake. He had made the greatest mistake of his life. So great a mistake that somehow he's got to find a way to make it right. He's got to change what he has instigated, what he has initiated, what he has put into place. So with that thought in mind, he takes the bag of money and he tries to give it back. But you know what happens? The chief priests, they just laugh at him. Judas, go away. You're a pest. We don't need you anymore. We don't need your money. We got what we wanted. You took care of that. And with that, he throws the money back into the temple. You could almost hear those pieces of silver clinking and rolling along the pavement of the temple. And as Judas turned to go, the 30 pieces of silver stay behind. And Judas realizes not only has he lost his Lord, but he's also lost his money. And we know from Scripture, and very shortly, he would lose his life. The Bible simply tells us this way. This is what it says, very simply. He went away and hanged himself. The final act of a man who could not live with himself and the memory of what he had done. And you know, the ultimate irony of that day was Judas died before Jesus did, as he took his life. Now, we know how Judas' story ended. But it was not always that way. Here are some remarkable facts about Judas. He was personally chosen to be an apostle by Jesus Christ. We know when Jesus chose them, Scripture tells us that these 12 chosen ones forsook all to follow the Lord. He spent over 3 years traveling the length and the breadth of Israel with Christ. He saw all the miracles of Christ in person. He watched as Christ healed the sick and raised the dead and cast out demons. He, along with the other apostles, was sent out to preach the gospel. He was one of the leaders of the apostles. No one suspected him of treason. Everywhere that James, Peter, and John went, you can also say that about Judas. He was there. He was by the side of Jesus. If anything, as we take a look at that band of followers, he was one of their leaders. The other apostles chose him to handle the money. You don't pick a man you don't trust to handle your money. You pick the best person, the most trustworthy person, the one you can count on. That's why they picked Judas. They never ever dreamed that Judas had treason in his heart. He who knew so much, who saw so much, who experienced Jesus up close and personal, we ask, how could a man like that go over to the other side? Why did Judas do it? What forces conspired him to make him betray his Lord? And over the century, great minds have pondered that question. And they've come up with all kinds of theories. And as you study the theories, you'll discover there's just a multitude of those. And even the gospel writers themselves give us very few clues. For one thing, more than likely, they didn't have an answer for it either, why he did it. And since Judas took his own life within a few hours after his betrayal, we don't have any statement giving his side of the story, why he did it. So we're left to speculate concerning what was his motivations. Let me share with you 3 major speculations that folks have come up with. The first one is he betrayed Jesus for money. Now, John is writing after the fact his gospel, inspired by God, as he penned these words. And he wrote this in John 12:6. He, talking about Judas, said this, not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. John begins to think, all right, that's where that money went. It was Judas. Greed played a part in his decision. The problem with that theory is 30 pieces of silver that he sold Jesus for was not very much. Not very much money. So if greed was his motivation, he had very little to show for his trouble. A second theory is he betrayed Jesus because he was disillusioned. And this is probably the most popular one. Many people look to Jesus as a kind of political Messiah who would lead the nation into overthrowing the Roman oppression. John, in his gospel in chapter 6, mentions the crowds who intended to come and make him king by force. And some think that Judas shared that same political ideal, that same political motive. In the beginning, Jesus' ministry was so popular, his popularity would grow, and it seemed like he would take the nation by acclamation. They would just say, all right, Jesus, you're king. Come on, you lead us. But as time began to pass and Jesus' ministry began to become more involved with people, what begins to happen when things good are going well, opposition began to grow. And it became very clear that Jesus would eventually be put to death. In fact, Jesus even predicted his own death. So if Judas saw Jesus as a political Messiah, then this change in his ministry must have been very disappointing. Jesus began to see that all of this stuff, when Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world, was nothing but a cop-out. He wasn't going to really be that political Messiah, that ruler that would overthrow the government and give Israel its own kingdom, its own authority and stuff. Jesus didn't want a kingdom in Judas didn't want a kingdom in this next world. He wanted a kingdom right here and now. Take care of me now. I don't want this pie in the sky stuff. I don't know if he said it like that, but you know what I mean. Judas sees Jesus as a loser. Crucifixion is not a good career move for people like Judas. So he dumped Jesus when things began to go sour. He was trying to move from the losing side to the winning side. He was looking out for number one, for Judas Iscariot. Third theory, he betrayed Jesus because he was frightened. Well, he saw the handwriting on the wall. Jesus was going to be put to death. So he went to the high priest with this little scheme and sort of just save his own skin, and why not? These folks were closing in on Jesus. His days were numbered. And more, Jesus was even talking about his own death. His days were numbered. And once they captured Jesus, what's going to happen to the rest of us? I'm one of the leaders. I'm one of the ones that's really kind of up front. And there are several things that can come to mind, and none of these things that can happen to me are very pleasant. I might be arrested. I might be put on trial alongside Jesus. And the way things are going, I might be put to death as well too. So I'm going to do something at least to save myself from all of this. And you know what? All of these theories kind of make a little bit of sense. But after all the discussion is over, we still don't know for sure why Judas did what he did. But we do know this: when Judas betrayed Jesus, he made the biggest mistake any man has ever made. And the Scripture is very perfectly clear what he did. He thought up the plan to betray Jesus. He approached the chief priest with this idea. He made the deal. He took the money. He left the Last Supper to go meet the soldiers. He led the soldiers to Jesus. He kissed Jesus on the cheek. The soldiers came. They arrested Jesus. They took him away. And then John also adds one other sad note in his gospel. He says when the soldiers first came up, Jesus was speaking to them, and before they could say anything, and while Jesus was talking to the soldiers, John adds this little detail. He says, and Judas the traitor was standing there with them. Now, when you get right down to it, Judas could have been a better man or he could have been a worse man. If he had been better, he would not have done such a thing as betraying Jesus. If he had been worse, he would not have felt such remorse. As it was, he was bad enough to do the deed and good enough to be able to unbear the guilt of it. So we would be mistaken if we put Judas in the same company of someone like Hitler. If we think Judas is like Hitler, then we have missed the very lesson of this life. And here's the application I want to make today. What happened to him could happen to any of us. What he did, probably any of us could do. And if we think otherwise, then we have missed the point of what this story is trying to help us understand. Here's the scary part. Judas is a lot like us, and we are a lot like him. In fact, the more religious we are, the more like Judas we are. And you can't get much more religious than being an apostle. He was as in of a person as anyone can be, and yet he betrayed the Lord. I want you to know Judas Iscariot's spirit, demeanor, still lives on in our world and our lives, and sometimes in our churches today. It lives in all of those who play the religious game. It lives in those who come to church for whatever they can get out of it. It lives in all of those who are pretending a commitment to Jesus that isn't real in their hearts. It lives in those who just go through the Christian motions. It lives in those who come to church and give their money, follow the rules, and yet really don't love the Lord Jesus Christ. As we close today, I've included in your bulletin insert some very searching questions. There's about 8 of them. What would it take for you to sell out the Son of God? Would you betray him for money? Would you betray him for a better job or for the better economic situation that you have? Betray him to keep what you have? Would you betray him to save your own skin? Would you betray him because he didn't live up to your expectations? Would you betray him because he thought he let you down? Would you betray him if you thought you could win the favor of important people? These aren't hypothetical questions. These are questions that as a person in ministry, I have seen people wrestle with time and time again. And even my own life I've wrestled with. Yeah, this church over here is a bigger church and they have a whole lot more money, and it'll be better to go to that church than staying in this little one. We wrestle. Do we betray where Jesus has planted us for something better because it's better for us? Judas Iscariot really does us a favor, because here's what he does. You see, if his story causes us to rethink our basic commitment to Jesus Christ, then this story takes on all new meaning to us. If it causes us to take a look, okay, God, where am I in this? Where's my walk with you? And there are some things that we need to consider this morning as we come to a close today. You call yourself a Christian, but are you a true follower, or are you just going through the motions? Or we can ask it this way: are you a pretender, or are you a true believer? Have you truly turned from your sins and trusted Jesus Christ as Savior? Or are you a fair weather friend of the Savior? When everything's going okay, I'm with you, Jesus. When things aren't going right, I'm out of here. Hard questions that are much easier to ask than to answer. The story of Judas Iscariot is in the Bible for many reasons, and not the least of which is that before we take anything for granted, we at least ask the question the other apostles asked that fateful night in that upper room. Lord, is it I? Is it me that will turn my back, walk away, give up, become lukewarm, less committed for my own motives, for my own reasons? As there's not a one of us in this room that does not face that question we have to answer in some form or some fashion today. Lord, is it I? Interesting about Judas, as he began to follow Jesus early in his ministry, he had a lot of room for, he was willing to forsake all and to follow him. He had a lot of room for Jesus and the Jesus stuff going on. But we see over time that was crowded out by whatever motivation it was. And there was not room for Jesus in his life anymore. The question we pose today is, do you have any room for Jesus in your life right now, today, and for eternity? We're not perfect. We have a wholehearted commitment, we still mess up. But because of the price that Jesus paid on the cross for our sins, we come to understand and experience God's grace and God's mercy and His love. And this morning you're here today and you have never made that step to even follow Jesus. Make a commitment. Ask Him into your life to be Lord and Savior. You will be answering that question today as we sing, have you any room for Jesus? If you walk out of the room today, you walk out. Or maybe as a believer, you're here and it's just sort of time to re-up again. Recommit, rededicate. So it's God, I just need to be back where I'm living out my life and my commitment to you. God, you may have to even say, God, I admit, I've had a little bit of Judas Iscariot in me. And I want to come back and be restored. Or maybe this morning you're looking for a church home. We'd invite you to consider Green Valley Baptist Church. If you're perfect, don't come here. We'll mess you up. But if you want to come and walk alongside some fellow pilgrims on a journey, we would invite you. But the most important question is, do you have any room for Jesus in your life today? We're going to stand up together right now and we're going to sing. God's Holy Spirit is impact your life and speaking to you even now. We invite you to come. Maybe you just want to come and pray. I'll also be here to pray with you, pray for you. Whatever God's leading you to do today, will you come this morning as Ron leads us?